Something really creepy happened to me last month. I live in an apartment building. It's pretty standard for the most part. The place is nice, and most of the residents seem nice as well. It's not a dumpy place or anything, but it's not the greatest in the world either. I've lived here for almost 2 years, and it's been good. There's a mailroom just inside the doors on the first floor where we get packages and stuff. I order things online all the time, and I have an Amazon Prime account that I use a lot. It's very convenient because you can get next day delivery sometimes. I remember that my coffee maker broke one day and I decided to order a new one. I drink coffee quite a bit, especially in the mornings before work. So I found one on Amazon for next day delivery. I saw when I was at work the next day that it had been delivered, and I went down to the mailroom when I got back home from work. However, when I arrived in the mailroom, I couldn't find my package. There's usually a lot of packages in the mailroom, but I looked at each and every one of them, and mine was not there. I didn't know if somebody had took it by mistake or what, because it said that it had been delivered. So I went back up to my apartment, and I was going on Amazon trying to figure out how to get my money back or something. Then, suddenly, there was a knock on my door. This was nighttime, so I didn't know who could be there. I got up and walked over to the door and looked through the peephole. Nobody was there. I opened up the door out of curiosity. There, sitting on the ground, was my coffee maker. I picked it up and was just so confused. I brought it inside and saw that the box was already open. The coffee maker was inside of it, but I had no clue why it was left on my doorstep now. After thinking about it for a while, the only thing I could think of was that somebody else took it by mistake. Maybe they thought it was theirs and opened it and then realized that it wasn't theirs. I really didn't know. That didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense, but I couldn't think of any other logical explanation. I also didn't know who had done it. I decided not to contact Amazon or anything. I figured this was just a freak thing and it wouldn't happen again. And at the end of the day, I had gotten my coffee maker like I had ordered. After a few days, I pretty much forgot about it. I used the coffee maker and it worked fine and everything. Well, sometime the next week, I ordered something on Amazon again. This time, it was skincare stuff. I went down to the mailroom to get the package when I got home from work again. It said that it was delivered. So when I looked in the mailroom, once more, I could not find it. When I looked at every package there and none of them had my name on it, I remembered back to the last time. I thought to myself, this better not have happened again. I went back up to my apartment and really did not know what to do. Sure enough though, later on in the night there was a knock at my door. I quickly went over to it and opened it. Whoever had knocked was gone, but my skincare products were also not outside the door. Instead, there was a note there. I picked it up and read it. It said, "To get your package, come to 112. That was the number of another unit on my floor. I didn't know all my neighbors or who exactly lived in 112, but I now knew who was stealing my packages. I did not go to the room to get it. Instead, I reported it to management of the apartment building. They ended up investigating by looking at the security footage. A guy who I had seen around a few times but never spoke to was the culprit. It showed him taking both my packages back to his apartment, then putting the things on my front step. He ended up getting evicted for it. Why he did that, I don't know."
This was last year in the middle of January. I live in a relatively small home in a small woodsy town. It was about 45 minutes outside of the city. I only had a half day of work, so this night I was free to chill at home. Around 7, I got an unexpected call from a friend. He said he was having car troubles and asked if I could do him a solid and give him a ride home. Maybe grab some food too. I didn't mind at all and said I'd be right over. This wasn't the first time this had happened, so we'd been through this before. I grabbed my jacket from the front closet and got my keys, then opened the front door to leave. As soon as I opened the door, my whole body jumped. There was a man standing right in front of me on the porch, like literally a foot away from the door. He had a heavy coat with a black gator neck scarf covering his lower face. The man didn't move at all though, like he wasn't equally as startled as me. For a second, I was just embarrassed for getting spooked like that, but then I immediately got curious why he was here. Before I could ask, he apologized and said he was just about to knock. I said it was alright and asked what he needed. The man took a second, then asked if I was David, or Daryl, I don't know, something like that. Whoever it was, wasn't me. I said no, and the man just said okay, and started walking off the porch. I stepped outside and shut and locked the door behind me, making sure the man walked all the way down my driveway and away from my home before I got in my car. I pretty much thought about that weird encounter the whole drive to my friend's work. My home was in a secluded neighborhood. Like, you don't get random people just going up to people's houses very often because they were so deep in the woods with long driveways. If he was just someone looking for someone else, I guess that did explain it though. I picked up my friend and we grabbed a quick meal at Culver's, then I drove him to his place and dropped him off. It was around 9 p.m. by this point. It was snowing just a little bit, but otherwise it was pretty calm outside. When I got home, I pulled into the driveway and walked up to the front door, unlocking it and getting inside. I took a moment to warm up, then hopped on the couch and turned the TV on. I didn't keep track of time after this, because I didn't have to work tomorrow, so there was no need to. If I had to guess, I was probably on the couch for 2 hours before I got tired. I got up and stretched, turning the TV off and starting to walk over to the stairs. But when I passed by the front door, I suddenly remembered that guy that was outside earlier. I'd pretty much forgotten about it up until now. Now that I was thinking about it though, I walked up to the door and looked out the peephole just to ease my mind. Nobody was on the porch, and the night still looked calm, still snowing and not very windy. However, after a second, I noticed something going across the driveway. It wasn't clear, so I had to open the door to get a better look. There were shoe prints in the thin layer of snow. They seemed to come all the way up the driveway from the road and near my car. Then they walked off into the yard where the trees blocked my view. Immediately, I felt very unnerved. I shut and locked the door. If this was the same guy as last time, coming back again, then something was seriously wrong. I kept looking back out the windows as I tried to think of what to do next. Thinking back on how strange my interaction with the guy was earlier only made it worse. In the moment, I was concerned enough to call the police. I dialed 911 and stayed by the window as I explained my situation. As I was talking though, I kept hearing something subtle. Every time I'd pause and listen, I wouldn't hear it anymore. The operator probably thought I was crazy. But about a minute into the call, there was a violent thud against the back of the house. I almost dropped my phone from how much it made me jump. I hurried over to the hallway, hearing another loud thud as I looked down. There was someone outside the back door. With the reflections of light from inside the house contrasted with the dark outside, I couldn't see anything but slight movement behind the door. Another thud crashed into it. It was heavy. They definitely had some kind of weapon or something to break the door down with. The operator told me to either find somewhere to hide and lock myself away, or find an escape. I decided to grab my keys and sprint to my car. Even though I knew the man was behind my house, it was still terrifying running out into the open. There could have been more than one person, or even someone waiting by my car. Thankfully, there wasn't, and I was able to get away. It was a good thing I left, because when the cops got there, the back door had been beaten open and watery shoe prints filled the house. But nobody was inside. All I could really give the officers was a description of the man who was at my doorstep, which there was no actual evidence of it being the same person. So if they did find him, it wouldn't do much anyways. But they never did. Whether or not it was him though, I think I got lucky that I ran into him on my way out of the house. Had I not, I wouldn't have checked out the door before going to bed. If I was asleep already, maybe they would have been more subtle with breaking in. I don't know, but what's so unnerving is that this all happened on just an ordinary day. There was no way to know. It could be any day that something like this happens. With him still out there, sometimes I feel like I'm just waiting for it to happen again. It was 2016. I lived with my two best friends, who I'll call Jason and Andrew for privacy. We were all roommates in an apartment in the city while we finished up our last year of college. Because we were all in school and had jobs, we didn't often have a lot of free time. When we did though, our usual activity that we all enjoyed was hiking, or I guess just exploring in general. Sometimes we'd go on trails, or just drive to a random town we hadn't been to before and walk around. This week, we all had Friday and Saturday off, so we wanted to find something to do on Friday night. Andrew had happened to hear from a friend earlier about this decommissioned factory on the outside of the city. It sounded cool, or interesting at the very least. None of us had done something like this before though, so we were all hesitant, but in the end we said screw it and just decided to check it out. We hopped in Jason's car and drove to the edge of the city. We live in the Midwest, so the city sort of abruptly ends and turns into flat land that goes on as far as you could see. That was basically where this factory was. We didn't know its exact address, if it even still had one, but we found it on Google Maps using the satellite view. We parked a block away at a gas station, then got out and walked the rest. The whole street to get there was empty. No cars or people anywhere. It almost felt like the entire block was abandoned. The factory building was way bigger than any of us were expecting. It was massive, with railing-type structures all over the outside, and tons of graffiti in places I don't even know how people were able to get to. The chain-link fence had barbed wire across the top, but in several spots it had clearly been cut open and moved from others sneaking in. We crawled over and made our way up to the metal door at the front, which was already open. As soon as we stepped inside, chills ran through me. The whole building was swaying, and the metal was creaking and groaning. It was windy outside, so it made sense, I guess, but it still added to the eeriness of the place. All the lights were off, of course, so our only light was some cheap flashlights Andrew had lying around his house. This main room we were in was full of huge, rusted machinery and narrow pathways between them. We all stayed in that room and kind of just wandered around. Eventually, I wandered to the end of the room and into a hallway, but before entering, I checked over my shoulder and saw one of my buddies was not too far behind me. I couldn't tell whether it was Andrew or Jason because they were in the dark by one of the machines, but I figured they saw me, so I was good to keep going without risking splitting up and getting lost. I started walking down, making it to another metal door and going through it. Just as I was walking into the next room and the door started closing, I heard footsteps coming down the hallway from the end I had just come from. Thinking it was Andrew and Jason, I kept walking and shined my light around the room. There were more machines, like a conveyor belt type thing, in the middle of the space, but along the ceiling was a walkway, or catwalk, and I could see a ladder hanging down on the other side. As I was looking, I heard the door open and close behind me. I called out my friends' names and turned around to tell them what I saw, but when my light hit the door, they weren't there. There was no one. I almost thought I was crazy for a second, but I knew I heard the door open. Andrew? Jason? Their names rang across the room, but they didn't reply. I started carefully walking over to the door, feeling my mind start getting worried. I opened the door and shined my light down the hallway. It was empty. What the hell? I didn't have time to think before hearing a slight crumble on the ground behind me. I whipped my light around. Standing maybe 6 or 7 feet from me was some deranged looking man. He had long hair and a messy beard and these strange, glazed over eyes. He instantly started sprinting at me like he was trying to tackle me. I backed into the hallway and slammed the door on him, then sprinted for the other end. I could hear my buddies calling out to me like they were trying to find me. I ran into the room and yelled at them to leave. We all ran out. We made it to the fence and left. I explained to them what happened on the way back to the car. Whoever that guy was hiding in the building had followed me into the hallway and into the room where I was alone. Obviously, he was trying to wait for me to split off from the group before attacking me. What he really would have done, I'm lucky to have not found out. Since then, we haven't tried anything like that again.
This is something that happened last summer. I live in a house with my wife and 2 daughters. My oldest daughter is 19 and she was home from college at the time. My youngest is 16 and in high school. Between the 4 of us living at the house, we order things online a good amount. It seems like every other day there's an Amazon package on the front step or something like that. So one night I remember that I was up a little bit later than usual. Both the girls were in their bedrooms upstairs and my wife had just gone up to bed. I was about to go upstairs, but I decided to load the dishwasher first to let it run overnight. After doing so, I was passing by the living room at the front of the house. I heard the sound of a car door closing in the otherwise quiet night. It got my attention and I glanced out the window to see a man come into view. This guy was walking in front of the house and then he started to go into our driveway. I didn't see the vehicle that he had come from my view, but I did see that the man was wearing a blue Amazon vest and he was also carrying a package. Now, I hadn't ordered anything, but I figured that either my wife or one of my daughters had. However, the strange thing is that it was 11:30 at night. I know Amazon delivers a lot, but I didn't think that they had deliveries in the middle of the night like this. Still, it was very possible, so I honestly didn't think too much of it. I was just about to go upstairs as I was standing at the base of them, but for some reason, I just decided to look out of the window to the man. When I did, he did not seem to notice me at all because the lights inside were out, and he walked up to the front door. However, he did not just put the package on the front step and then walk away like I thought he would. He stayed on the front step, which was out of my sight, for sort of a long time. Obviously, he did not knock on the door or ring the bell or anything. After like 15 seconds of him being on the front step, I got curious. I moved over to the window to see what the man would do. When I finally got a view of him, I saw him still holding the package, seemingly looking around, and then he moved away from the front step. Then he walked around to the side of the house. By this point, I was getting suspicious. After going out of my sight again, I went around the house to figure out where the guy had gone. I looked out of a side window but did not see him there. Then I thought I heard footsteps of somebody moving outside. They were towards the back of the house, and I walked over towards the dining room, which was at the back of the house. When I made my way there, I saw out of one of the back windows the man walk by for just a split second. Then I looked over to the back door and he came into view. I quickly ran over and turned on the light to the back. When I did, I saw the man then suddenly turn and quickly start running away. He took the Amazon package with him and went all the way back around the house. The guy did not stop until he went back off our property and into the street. I didn't get a good look at the car that he went into because we had a large tree in the way, but I did hear him get inside and start the engine, and then he drove away. I realized then that the man likely did not work for Amazon. It was most likely just a disguise to look like a regular delivery driver if anybody happened to notice him. I know that a lot of people work for Amazon and deliver at all kinds of times, but still I think people should always be aware of their surroundings and not get complacent. I went to bed after that, and the next day I told my wife and daughters about it. None of them were expecting an Amazon package to arrive overnight. It's very creepy to think of what might have happened had I not stayed up late that night.
It was 2019. I was a sophomore in college and did babysitting 3 to 4 nights a week as a means for paying off my car. For about a month, I had this 3-year-old boy that I'd watch once a week. The parents were soft-spoken, but friendly. They'd always leave around bedtime, so all I'd have to do is make sure the kids stayed asleep and was okay while they were gone for usually 4 to 5 hours. This night, I pulled in at 8 p.m. I said hi to the parents, who mentioned the kid was already in their room asleep. Then they thanked me and left. I never asked what they did, going out this late every week. I think they mentioned one time that they went to the city. Maybe it was like a date night or something. Anyway, I put my bag down and did a walkthrough of the house like I usually did, then sat on a chair in the living room. They'd always say feel free to watch TV or cook dinner or whatever, but usually I just sit on my phone to pass the time, occasionally walking by the kids' room to make sure they were okay. Not even an hour in though, I got a call from the mother. I obviously answered, but I was confused when she asked if I called her just now. I said no, I was still at the house and hadn't called for anything. I guess she had gotten a call from an unsaved number, but nobody said anything when she answered. She thought maybe I'd gotten a new phone, or was using a different one or something, and the call just didn't come through correctly. I assured her we were all good here, and she said okay, and hung up. I thought nothing of it. She was probably just a concerned parent wanting to make sure everything was good. I did another check on the kid, then sat down again. About 20 minutes passed. I was still on my phone watching a video when I saw headlights shine into the front windows. The light came in through the cracks between the blinds. I thought it was just a neighbor pulling into their house, but after a couple minutes of the light not shutting off, I got up and peeked out the window. There was a dark gray sedan parked right out front of the house by the curb. It was old and rusty, and the windows were blacked out. I was so focused on the car for a minute, I almost didn't even notice the guys standing a few feet from it. They were closer to the end of the driveway, standing near the sidewalk and looking up at the house I was in. I was a little concerned, but I didn't want to confront them since it wasn't even my house, so I just watched from the window. After a minute, he walked back to his car and got in. Oddly, they pulled away very slowly, like they were still focused on looking at the house. I watched as their headlights went down the road, cutting in and out of the trees, but then they stopped again. I could see the light between the trees staying still, far down the road. Then it shut off, like they had parked and got out. Maybe it was someone visiting a neighbor and they were trying to find the address numbers and got mixed up somehow. Feeling like it was a little strange, I stayed by the window for a good 5 minutes, but I never saw the man come back down to the house, so I figured it was probably just a weird coincidence. I went back to the chair in the living room. I did think about texting the parents, but didn't want to worry them about something that was likely nothing. Plus, it probably wouldn't have made a difference to anything anyways. I decided to turn the TV on, keeping it on low volume so I didn't wake up the kid. A few minutes in, I went to open the blinds as well because I found myself still thinking about it. A whole hour and a half passed, or maybe even 2 hours. Nothing really happened during that time. I just waited in the living room with the TV on and tried my best to stay awake. My eyes were getting heavy and I could tell I was half asleep. Like I was still awake, but just fully spaced out and my eyes partially open. But through my less than aware state I was in, I randomly heard a light thump. It didn't fully wake me until I heard it again. My eyes opened wider and I got up. I wasn't sure what it was, but I wanted to check on the kid first, so I started walking to the stairs. But when I passed through the hallway, I heard it again and saw something in the corner of my eye. I turned my head. There was someone outside the back door, pulling on the handle and looking right at me. Once he saw me looking at him, he started pulling on the handle even harder, trying to brute force it open. My adrenaline kicked in, and I sprinted up the stairs. I went in the room and got the kid, trying to keep them calm. As I was up there, the thumps got louder. Like now he was using something to rip open the door. With the kid in my arms, I hurried down the stairs. When I got to the bottom, there was one more sound. It sounded like cracking plastic and metal. I went back into the hallway toward the front door, but I saw the back door was open and the man was rushing inside. He had regular casual clothes on and dark hair. That was all I saw before I noticed a knife in his hand. He didn't hesitate to start running at me. I rushed out the front door, getting into my car and backing out just as he got up to my window. I drove to a safe place and called 911 and the parents. Of course, he was gone before anyone got there. The way I see it, I think the man was going to threaten me with the knife, or even harm me, so he could kidnap the kid. That's what it felt like was going to happen. But how'd he know the parents would be away? And why kidnap this kid specifically? What's weird is after all of it, the parents stopped talking to me and never hired me again. They thanked me on the night of the incident, but then went radio silent. It was like they didn't want me to find anything out about what happened. I did my own research, but didn't find much. Only thing I found out was that the mother had been married before to a man that looked somewhat similar to the guy I saw. No way to know for sure though. I'm just speculating. It's been years now, so I don't think we'll be getting any answers. This was nearly 5 years ago from when I'm writing this. I was in high school at the time, and my best friend was a guy named Colton. We hung out most days after school and just found random places to go to hang out at. Anyway, this was right after our school let out for winter break, so we had a ton of time and nothing to do. We spent this whole day just chilling at his place and playing Xbox, but we eventually got bored. We felt like walking around or going somewhere. Now, our whole town always knew about this creepy church that sat at the end of a deserted road. It was kind of blocked out by trees since they stopped keeping up with it. It had been abandoned for as long as I'd known about it, but even though we always knew about it, it had never really come across our minds to explore it. When I was a kid, I was always terrified of it, but for some reason now, I was a little bit more intrigued. So when me and Colton were walking around the edge of town and happened to pass by the deserted road to the church, we decided to check it out. At least to walk down the road and see what it looked like nowadays, and if nobody else was there, maybe look inside. It was already dark out, but the moon was bright enough for us to still kind of see where we were going. We also had our phones on us in case we needed a flashlight. The road was awful. It was cracked and had thick vines and bushes growing between the pavement. By the time we got to the end of it and looked back, we couldn't even see the street we'd just come from. Looking at the church though, it was way creepier than I'd remembered. It looked like the forest had engulfed it. Even the fence going around the courtyard was almost unrecognizable because it was drowning in the tall plants that covered it. We made our way through a broken section. It was very quiet as we approached the church. We didn't see any lights or hear anything to indicate anyone else was here, so we walked up to the large entrance door and pushed it open. The sound it made was like bending wood, creaking and scraping its way across the floor. It echoed through the whole room. Both of us stayed at the doorway for a minute and just looked from there. What was really odd, and also kind of creepy, was that the whole room, full of rows of benches, looked almost untouched. There wasn't any debris anywhere, or even graffiti like you'd expect from an old place like this. I stepped in, and Colton followed behind me. I slowly walked down the aisle, just looking around at everything. Each step we took echoed throughout the vaulted ceilings. but when we got closer to the end, there was a sudden thud. It rang through the whole church. Both of us jumped and quickly got our phone flashlights out. We couldn't tell where it came from though. The sound kind of took over the whole building and echoed all around. We stood still and moved our lights around, looking for anything that had caused the sound, but we really saw nothing. Colton thought he saw another room closer to the entrance, and maybe something had fallen over in there. Regardless, we kept exploring. I walked to the end of the hall where the podium was. I stood up there and looked back down at the way we came. It was so dark by the entrance, even my light couldn't reach that far. After a minute, Colton said he wanted to check out the other room, so we both headed over there. On the side wall was a door. I opened it and shined my light in. From just a quick look, I couldn't tell what the room was. We walked in and looked around. There were chairs stacked up against the wall and a bunch of boxes everywhere, like storage or something. While we were in there, we heard a subtle sound. We both stopped moving. It was a light thump, and then another. It sounded like someone walking down the aisle we just came from. Both of us froze up. The sound was coming from the podium area, walking down toward the entrance. We could only see out the thin crack in the doorway of the room we were in, but we stared at the darkness out there and waited as the sound got closer. Then, for a split second, someone crossed through the dark and out the front entrance door. The footsteps then stopped, and we held our breath as we waited, before we heard the door creak closed. We looked at each other in fear. Neither of us knew whether to try running away, or hide, or what to do. We ended up just waiting in fear for several minutes, until we thought whoever it was had left the area. Then we sprinted out of the room and out the entrance. We didn't stop running until we got down the deserted road and onto the street. We don't know who was in there, but they came from the end of the church that I had just been at. There was no doorways over there, so they had to be hiding or something, somewhere right next to me. That is, if it even was a person. At this point, years later, I can't even say anything is for sure.
This is something that happened about 2 years ago. I was in college at the time, living in this old 2-bedroom beat-up house. I lived with my roommate named Robbie Anderson. We both worked part-time jobs as well as had classes at all random times, so I didn't see Robbie really that much. We were friends though, but not like best friends or anything. So one evening, Robbie was gone at work. It was about 9 o'clock at night, and I was inside watching On Patrol Live on TV. The living room was at the front of the house, so I could see out of it pretty good. I remember noticing something out of the corner of my eye. I looked over and saw this random guy who I didn't know just walking right into our front yard. This looked very suspicious to me. The guy walked up to the front door and then started to try to open it. Now, there were 2 doors there. The first was a screen door, and the second was the much stronger and solid regular door, so you would have to open up one and then the other to get inside. Both of these happened to be locked though, as we did not live in the safest neighborhood. I instantly got up from the couch and walked over to the door. After the guy tried to open the first door, he then knocked on it. I made my way over there and I opened up the first door. When I did, I saw the man standing there before me. He had a pretty large build, was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, and had brown hair. I said in a borderline rude way, "What do you want?" The man said that he was from Amazon and he was there to deliver a package. I said, "Well, where is it?" The guy didn't have anything with him. He said that it was back in his truck, and it was policy that I had to sign for it first and then he would go and get it. I knew that I hadn't ordered anything on Amazon, and I told the man that. The guy then asked me if anybody else lived there, and I said, "What's it to you?" He claimed that he was supposed to deliver the package. It seemed sketchy, and I doubted that Robbie had ordered something like that. The man then ordered me to open the door so I could sign for the package. He said that it was very large and expensive, and I needed to help him get it out of his truck. I told him to get lost, and then I slammed the door in his face. The guy stood there for a moment, and then I heard him loudly curse at me a few times. Then he walked back through the yard and left. After he was out of my sight, I called Robbie and told him about it. Robbie confirmed that he had not ordered anything. I was glad that I didn't open the door for that guy. I mean, he wasn't even wearing anything that indicated he worked for Amazon, and he didn't even have a package with him. It was about as sketchy as can be. After that, I didn't see that guy again for the time that we lived there. I used to work at Amazon for a while. I worked in the warehouse, and I would do things like pack orders and receive inventory, among other things. The coworkers that I worked with were mostly cool. I didn't have a problem with any of them, until that all changed. So I remember that I had this one coworker named Mark. I never really talked to him that much. Overall, he seemed fine and just like everyone else. So one night, I got off of work and left. I drove home, which would take about 15 minutes. Nothing out of the ordinary happened until I was almost back. The roads had been pretty quiet because of it being a little bit later. However, I did not notice anything strange. After I got to the parking lot of my apartment, I got out of my car. I recall noticing a car pulling into the other side of the parking lot, but I didn't really think much of it. It's a fairly large apartment complex with quite a few people who live there, and the parking lot is pretty big too. The car parked on the far opposite end. Then I walked towards the building and then went inside. After that, I walked down the hallway and went up the stairs to my floor. My apartment building was not the nicest and sort of run down. When I got up to my floor, I walked to my room. However, as I was doing this, I heard the door to the stairs opening behind me. I still thought nothing of it. It was a ways back and I couldn't see the person in my view at that point. After unlocking my door, I heard footsteps in the hallway, but I didn't look. Then I went inside, closed the door behind me, and locked it like I always did. Now, not even 10 seconds after I had locked the door, somebody tried opening it. I was still standing nearby, and it really surprised me. I stepped over and looked through the peephole. When I did, I saw Mark from work at Amazon standing there. I was surprised to say the least. I didn't know what on earth he was doing there. For a moment, I was thinking about opening the door, but I decided not to. Then Mark walked away out of sight. At that point, I did open the door. He was a ways away now, and as he was still walking away, after I looked outside and he heard the door open, he turned back. I called out his name, and I was starting to ask him what he was doing here. As soon as he saw me, though, he just turned and ran. He sprinted down the rest of the hallway and out of my sight. It was really weird. The next day when I got to work, I asked if Mark was there, and I was told no. I told my supervisor about what had happened, and he said that he was going to talk to Mark. However, Mark never showed up. He must have quit the job, because I never saw him again after that. I only worked there a few more months. I also do not live in that same apartment anymore. Looking back, I realized that Mark must have followed me home without me noticing. I'm not really sure how I didn't notice, but I just didn't. I think he got in the building because people were always propping the doors open with stuff, and I'm not even sure if some of the doors locked properly or closed properly. It was kind of a rundown place, and I'm glad I don't live there anymore. It was a very creepy experience, and I'm really glad that I locked my apartment door when I did. I don't know what could have happened if not. I'm an Amazon delivery driver and have been for a little over a year. I drive one of the Amazon trucks and deliver to several neighborhoods in a particular city. I deliver to both houses and apartments, and overall I enjoy it. Things are usually pretty easy because I don't have to drive on some of the very narrow roads. Anyways, the story I want to talk about happened roughly 6 months ago. So I'd been on the job for about 6 months and had gotten used to most things. There was this one neighborhood that I had been delivering to on many days. I would describe it as a very typical neighborhood. There were houses on both sides of the street with nice front yards and driveways. I would park on the side of the road and deliver to the houses and slowly make my ways down. On most days, I would say at least 10 of the houses had Amazon packages to be delivered. Some houses would obviously get packages almost every day. So one day, I got about halfway down the street and I parked my truck to deliver to one house in particular. When I got out of the truck, I went to walk up the driveway and leave the package at the front step. I knew that I had delivered to this house several times before and I recognized it. As I was walking up the driveway, I saw this man standing in the garage next to the house. The garage door was open and there was also a car inside. The man was watching me, and I thought about going and handing him the package. However, as I continued to walk up the driveway, he looked away and then he walked farther into the garage and kind of out of sight. Then I just went to the front step, set the package down, and then headed back to my truck. I remember when I was getting back to my truck, I saw the guy staring at me again. I didn't really think too much of this whole thing, but I mentioned that because something strange happened soon after. I remember that I continued with my route for the day. I was out delivering packages, and when I got off, I drove the truck back to the Amazon warehouse. After parking the truck, I went inside, and a short time later, I headed out to my car to drive home. When I got inside my car in the parking lot though, I saw this other car parked a ways across from me. I don't know how I noticed this, because the car's lights were off, and it wasn't like directly in front of me or anything. But I saw that there was a man in the driver's seat of the car, and he was looking at me. I was sure that it was the same guy who I had seen in the garage. It took me like 5 seconds to remember that. When I saw him, I knew he looked familiar, but I couldn't tell from what. Then I realized. I was very confused though as to why he would be there. I sat in my car for a short time, wanting to see what the guy was doing. He appeared to just be sitting in his car. I couldn't really tell if he was looking over at me, but it kinda seemed like it. After I sat there for like 2 or 3 minutes, I remember seeing the lights to his car suddenly turn on, and then he drove away. I was a little creeped out by this. Then I just drove home though. I didn't know what else to do. Now, for a few days, I did not deliver to that house. Then, probably 3 days later, I did have another delivery there. I left my truck and started walking up the driveway again. This time, the garage door was closed and I did not see the man staring at me or anything. But when I got to the front door, there was a note taped to it. The note said, "Please deliver package inside the house." I didn't really know if I should, but after thinking for a few seconds, I decided to. I thought that maybe they had had a problem with people stealing packages or something, and if this one got stolen, I might get in trouble for not delivering it even though I had. I don't really know, but that's what I was thinking at the time. I opened the door and it was unlocked. It looked like a pretty typical entryway of a house. But then I saw another note taped to a wall straight inside the house. This one said, "Deliver package that way," with an arrow pointing to the right. This was just too weird. I just laid the package down right inside the door and then turned around and left. I went back to my truck and continued on. After that, I didn't get any more package deliveries to that house. But something else that's weird is I would still drive down that street for other deliveries. Like a week or so after the incident, I remember seeing 2 police cars parked on the side of the road in front of that house. I'm not sure what it was about, but I think that guy seemed really sketchy. Like 2 weeks later, my route changed. I haven't been back there since. I'm not sure what the deal was with that guy, but he certainly gave me the creeps.
This was last year during a solo road trip I was taking from Wisconsin to Montana. Most of the roads there are basically barren, aside from the first hour and the last hour. Everything else is forest or open fields, maybe some small mountains too, once I got further west. Anyway, because of how I had everything scheduled, I was going to be driving through the night and most of the day, rather than taking up 2 full days of driving and having to spend on an extra hotel in between. I knew it would still be tough, but I thought it was worth it. I started the drive at 7 p.m. I double-checked I had everything packed into my car and had my snacks and stuff in the front seat with me. Then I headed onto the road. First hour was through the city and small towns, but then it was open road from there. Barely any cars, and not many places to stop, aside from a gas station every 15-ish miles. By hour 2, I'd only used up a third of my gas tank, but with the gas stations seeming to get further and fewer between, I figured I'd top off before entering the really rural section of the drive. It took 20 minutes before I finally found a station to stop at. Nobody else was there. It was just some really small place with 4 gas pumps. The convenience store wasn't even open. I pulled in and parked next to a pump, getting out and starting to pump the gas. I don't know if it was because the place was older, or maybe hadn't been filled up in a while, but the gas was coming out really slow, like almost a whole minute just for 1 gallon to come out. I leaned up against my car and just waited. That's about when another car came down the road. The speed limit was 55, but it looked like they were only going 20 or 30, initially passing the gas station, but then slowing down and backing up. That was strange, and honestly a bit dangerous on a single road like that in the middle of the night. But they backed up to the entrance and pulled into the station, parking at the pump right behind me. I figured they just missed the entrance and really needed gas. I stayed looking forward at my pump as I heard someone get out and walk to the side of their car. But after a minute of not hearing them starting to pump the gas, or even move at all, I glanced over to see what they were doing. The man was wearing a gray flannel and black jeans and was relatively tall, and he was staring at me. Like when I looked over, he was already looking at me. I awkwardly smiled and nodded, then looked away again. I couldn't help but feel like he was still looking at me though. After a good 10 seconds, I finally heard him grab the pump and put it in his car. I felt relief, like maybe he was just getting gas, and I was overthinking it. I was out there for another minute before deciding I'd waited enough and just took the pump out and locked up my gas cap. When I did, I saw the man looking at me again. His eyes were so dull and heavy, like he was tired, but chugged caffeine or something. I got in and pulled back onto the road. Weird guy, I thought, but I didn't put too much weight on it. At some point during the next 3 hours of the drive, it started raining. I'd now been driving for 5 hours total, and it was just past midnight. The rain made me feel like I had to pay more attention to the road, which in turn made the drive more exhausting and tiring. I tried opening an energy drink and snacking, but it really didn't help all that much. By 1 a.m., I just needed a break. My gas was starting to run low too. I drove down the long barren road until finally there was a gas station to pull off at. It looked pretty run down and was just as empty as the last one, but still had lights on and everything. I pulled in and filled up my tank, then pulled into the side of the small building and parked in one of the spaces. I looked up the weather to see how long the rain would last, and I looked up any nearby towns, but there were none. It looked like I was basically right in the middle of nothing. I ended up deciding I was good to take a 30-minute nap just to refresh myself, and hopefully the rain would slow down too. I leaned back and fell asleep. When I woke up, rain was still slapping against the roof, and my alarm hadn't gone off yet. It had only been about 25 minutes. I sat up and looked out the windshield. The whole place was quiet, but there was a car at one of the pumps. I leaned forward and looked closer. It was the same one from the other stop. I was almost sure of it. Either this was a really big coincidence, or something was wrong. Even more odd, the guy wasn't anywhere I could see, not in his car or outside. I felt my face start to go pale. Where the hell was this guy? There was nowhere else at this empty gas station that man could possibly be at. Whatever this was, I didn't want to stay to find out. I turned on the car and put it in reverse. But when I looked in my mirror as I backed out, I saw him. Not behind my car. He was in my back seat, eyes piercing through the dark at me. I jolted forward and kicked my door open, jumping onto the pavement. The car was still in reverse, so it was slowly backing up. I started running, but I never heard the man get out of the car. I ran into the woods, then watched as my car continued to roll back for a while, then suddenly stopped. A second later, he drove away, leaving me stranded at some unknown gas station in the middle of nowhere. It was then I realized my phone was still on the dashboard. I stood there in shock for a minute, standing in the rain and taking in the reality of the situation. Then I looked over at the car. he just left his own car. I walked over and found the door to be unlocked, keys in the ignition, and random groceries in the back seat. And by some odd chance, I found the phone laying on the floor by the passenger seat. It was locked, but I was still able to call 911 on the lock screen. I didn't realize it at the time. I guess I thought whoever stole my vehicle was just stupid and left everything behind. But this car wasn't theirs. It was also stolen. Everything in it was from someone else that the man had done the same thing to as he did to me. Though from what I heard, they weren't as lucky to get out completely unharmed. When talking with investigators, they seemed to think the man didn't sneak into my back seat and let me start leaving for no reason. Likely, he was going to wait until we were on the road to reveal himself, and who knows why he would want me hostage, or what he planned to do. He was never found, and neither was my car. This was only 2 years ago. In our town, there was this one house that had been abandoned for I think about 2 decades. It was an older place, nestled away in the trees, and after nobody would buy it, everyone just forgot about it. It slowly got covered up by the woods and left to rot. I was always interested in these types of places and loved to explore them. And one random afternoon I had off work, that's exactly what I did. I walked there with a small backpack and a flashlight. Usually I'd go with friends, but this house was so close by and seemed less significant than other places we'd been to, so I didn't bother. The driveway going into the woods was almost completely gone. Grass had grown over the gravel. I marched my way through it, eventually taking my flashlight out so I could see better. The house was deeper into the woods than I'd remembered. I felt like I walked for 5 or 6 minutes before getting there. It was an old wooden home, built before garages were even a thing. I guess it kind of looked like a large 2-story cabin. I walked up to one of the front windows, which was broken, and leaned my head through it. I listened to the inside for 30 seconds to make sure I was alone. Then, after hearing nothing, I went to the front door. The door was unlocked and already slightly cracked open, so I just pushed it wide open and walked in. The inside was decaying all around. Disturbingly, there was still stuff in here from whoever owned it all those years ago. The living room had an old sofa, all torn up and dusty, and there were several picture frames that had fallen off the walls and shattered. I walked through the first floor, looking at all the left behind things, curious about what I'd find out about this place. The floor was small though. After just a minute or two, I went upstairs to the second floor. The stairs were creaky and shaky. I'm surprised they hadn't caved in already. The second floor had a hallway with 2 rooms. One of the doors was open and the other was closed. I looked into the open one. The room was empty, which was strikingly different from downstairs. I stepped in and moved my flashlight all around, but was interrupted when I heard a thud below me. My heart immediately started racing. It didn't sound natural, like a noise the house would make. I hurried down the stairs and waved my flashlight all around. The house was so quiet now, and I didn't see anything moving that could have made the sound. Having that bad gut feeling though, I told myself I should just leave. Usually with my friends I explore with, we always say at the first sign of anything sketchy, we leave. Being alone, I definitely wasn't staying. I quickly walked down the hallway, still moving my flashlight all around. But when I got to the front of the house, the door was shut. I had left it wide open. I hurried up to it and pulled the handle, but it didn't move. It was locked or bolted closed on the outside. I immediately started to panic, knowing someone else had to be here with me and just locked me in. I ran over to the broken window and jumped out. I didn't see anyone as I sprinted into the woods, turning my flashlight off and staying off of the path. My heart was still racing as I walked between the trees, but then a light came from ahead. I was confused and moved behind a tree. It was a red and blue light flickering at the end of the driveway. There were 2 cop cars cutting through the thick grass and driving toward the abandoned house. They passed by me, rushing to the front of the home as I remained hidden. Something in me knew that they weren't there for me. I watched for a minute, then ran out of the woods and back home. I don't know who else was there, or why the police were rushing toward the house. I tried to find out more information on it in the coming weeks, but never found anything released to the public. Whatever was going on in there, or whoever was in there, must have been pretty bad. I'm lucky to be here right now.